Today's video is going to be starting our conics chapter, and we're going to start first by looking at circles. When we look at circles, we're going to start with the general form, and the general form of a circle is x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared is equal to r squared. And we know now that when we subtract on the inside, when we pull it to the outside, it's going to be the opposite of what we think. The hk, which we are used to seeing as the vertex, is going to be the center of our circle. So the center of the circle will be found at hk. The radius is r. You just want to be really careful because when you look at the equation is set equal to r squared, not r. So when you find the radius, you're going to have to take the square root of what the number is set equal to. Alright, so let's start off simple with the first one. We've got x squared plus y squared is equal to 16. We know that our center is at hk. The number subtracted from the x, well, there's no number subtracted from x, so that's 0. And there's no number being subtracted away from y, so that's going to be 0 as well. So our center of our circle is going to be at 0, 0. The radius, which is equal to the r squared, so 16 is really our r squared, so we have to square root that to find that our radius in this case is going to be equal to 4. And you know enough about circles from all of your other classes that a circle, all radii are going to be congruent, so all of our radii in our circle are going to be congruent. They're all going to be a distance of 4. So for our sake, we're just going to count up and down and left and right. So we're going to go 4 to the right, 4 up, 4 left, and 4 down, and that's going to give us our shape of our circle. Number 2, we've got a little bit more going on. We see that we have numbers being subtracted and added from our x's and our y's. So this time our center is going to be at 2, negative 5. Just like any other equation we've had for our absolute value, for our parabolas, when it's inside of the parentheses, it's going to be the opposite of what you see when you bring it out. So the minus 2 is going to be a positive 2. The positive 5 is going to be a negative 5. And that 4 is our r squared. So if r squared is equal to 4, then our radius in this case is going to be 2. So we start at the center of the circle. So we go right 2, down 5. There's our center, and our radius is 2, so we're going to go 2 right, 2 up, 2 left, and 2 down. So we've got a smaller radius, so we've got a smaller circle. Number 3, we've just got an x squared, which means there's no transitioning, no moving with the x's. So we've got our center is going to be at 0, 2. And we've got r squared being 36, therefore when we square root, r is going to be equal to 6. Now in our last chapter we learned anytime that we were solving for something that was being squared, we had an add, a plus, or a minus. If you think about it, if we had a positive negative choice, the negative wouldn't make sense because we couldn't have a negative radius, just like we can't have a negative distance. So we're going to keep this just as a positive 6. Alright, so we started our center at 0, 2. So 0 up 2. There's the center of our circle. Our radius is 6, so we go 6 right, 6 up, 6 left, and 6 down. This one is a little bit different though. If we notice we don't have an equal sign, we have a greater than or equal to sign. So we kind of go back and remember all those inequality chapters that we did. And when we are graphing a linear inequality, you've got to remember the difference between your solid and your dashed lines. Because it's greater than or equal to, we're going to have a solid. So if you remember back, those two will give us a solid line. If it's a greater than or a less than, then we're going to have a dashed line. So that's still going to be true when we are graphing our circles and any other conic that we end up graphing in this chapter. So we're going to have a solid line, so we can go ahead and connect our points on our circle that we've created for our shape. And that's really bad. now we have to also remember that when we had inequalities, we were shading in different directions. We have a greater than or equal to. Just like before, I'm going to pick a test point, and I generally will pick 0, 0 just because it makes life easier. When I plug 0, 0 in, well, 0 squared is 0. 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. Is 4 greater than or equal to 36? No. So since that's not true, we are going to shade outside the circle. So if it's true, we shade inside the circle or wherever the 0, 0 is. So since 0 was inside the circle and it was false, we shade outside the circle. If 0, 0 was true and it was inside the circle, we would shade inside. Okay, so we look at our next one, and we've got another inequality. We first start with our center. So the positive 4 is a negative 4 when we take it out. The positive 1 is a negative 1. And if r squared is 25, that means our radius is 5. So we start at our center at negative 4, negative 1. Radius 5, so we go right 5, down 5, left 5, and up 5. Now we have a less than symbol, so this time we're going to have a dashed line connecting the points in our circle. And I'm going to use 0, 0 again because I can clearly see that 0, 0 is inside my circle. I plug that in. We've got 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 squared is 16. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1. 16 plus 1 is 17. 17 is less than 25, so that's true. Since it's true and 0, 0 is inside the circle, we are going to shade inside of our circle. So we're still using that solid dashed line concept and our shading concept using your test point. Make sure that you're always using that test point to see which way you shade. Okay. On the back side of our note sheet, we are going to talk about graphing form. So what we just looked at, we just graphed 4 circles. I gave you the equations in graphing form. You could see the center and you could see your r squared. What happens when I give you all these x's and y's? It's not in graphing form and we don't know any of that information. So what we have to do is we have to put it into graphing form. The way we do this is by completing the square, which we just spent a whole chapter on. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to organize my pieces. So I'm going to put the x's together. So I've got an x squared and a negative 8x. Then I'm going to put the y's together. Y squared, and that is a negative, oh, that was a positive 6y. Make sure, yep. And I'm going to move that number to the other side. So if you remember with completing the square, we wanted our number away because we were going to complete the square and create a new number. So that negative 56 on the left is going to become a positive 56 on the right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to complete the square for the x's and for the y's separately. So we look at our first term. When we complete the square, in case you forgot, we take half of the middle term, which is a negative 4, and then we square it. So a negative 4 times negative 4 gives us a positive 16. And then we take half of our y middle term as well. Half of 6 is 3. We square 3. And we add 9. Now remember, we've got to keep our equation in balance. So if I add 16 on the left, I have to add 16 on the right. If I add 9 on the left, I've got to add 9 on the right. Okay, so then that was all the hard work right there. We look at our x's. We just completed the square, so when we factor that, we know that's going to be x minus 4 quantities squared. We completed the squares for the y. When we factor that, we know that we're going to have y plus 3 quantities squared. We've got our less than or equal to sign. 56 plus 16 plus 9 gives us 81. So by completing the squares for the x's and the y's, we just changed our equation into graphing form. Now I can tell you that my center is at 4, -3, and we know that our radius is going to be at 9. Alright, so let's move on to our next one. Notice this time we have our x's and our y's again, but we've got a little bit different of a setup. I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm going to group my x's together. So I've got 4x squared and a 16x. And then I'm going to group the y's. I've got a 4y squared. Don't have any more y's. And I'm going to move the number from the left side over to the right side. So that's going to be a greater than 20. We know for here, if I want to complete the square, I need to have my first term as a positive 1x squared. So I'm going to pull the 4 out. When I pull the 4 out, I'm left with x squared plus 4x. And that's going to allow me to complete the square. I take half of the middle term, which is 2, and we square it. So we are adding 4 there. Then we have 4y squared. I don't have a y term, so I'm not able to complete the square for the y's, which is completely fine. Don't force something if it's not there. We can't complete the square unless we have an x squared and an x, or a y squared and a y. You need the a term and the b term. And you're completing the square to find that c term. Here we only have the a term. So we've got greater than, we have that 20, and then we just added the 4. But I have 4 of those trinomials, so it's 4 times 4 that I'm adding to that right-hand side. We factor this over here, so we've got 4 times, this factors to be x plus 2 quantity squared, plus 4y squared is greater than 20 plus 16, gives us 36. Now when we look at this, I know it's going to be a circle. And I see that I have the same number right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that out. So I'm going to divide every piece by 4. I only have 3 pieces because this is all one piece. When I divide all that by 4, I've got x plus 2 quantity squared plus y squared is greater than 9. Now it looks more familiar as graphing form. And we can see that our center is going to be at a -2, 0. Opposite of what you see there. There's no movement with the y, so that's a 0. And our radius is at 3. Alright, we are almost done with our circles for today. We want to write the equation of the circle, and this time I'm giving you the center and I'm giving you a point. So the first thing that we need is that general form. X minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared is equal to r squared. When we look here, the center, remember that's going to be your hk. Your point is going to be your xy. So we plug in the x of 6 minus your minus your h, which is 3, plus y, which is 2, minus k, which is 6. Now we don't know what the radius is, so that's what we're going to be solving for. 6 minus 3 is 3 squared. 2 minus 6 is a -4 squared is equal to r squared. So we've got 9 plus 16 is equal to r squared, and r squared is 25. That does tell us that our radius is going to be a 5, but be careful when you write your equation. The equation is set equal to an r squared, not an r. So we've got x minus our h, which is 3, quantity squared, plus y minus k. So y minus 6 quantity squared is equal to 25. Just like in the last chapter when we wrote vertex form and intercept form, the only variables that you should see in your answer are x's and y's. And that is the last problem, and we are done for today.